All right. PowerPoint is up. Everybody's smiling. How long are they going to smile
Yes, they are. And that's a great question. It's Cam Reddish, Manuel Quickley, Derrick Rose, and Evan Fournier. It's the trade deadline, 12/15 edition for the Knicks. So what's the plan? What's the plan, John? And really,
I don't know. Does Leon know?
Matt, I think he does. But as we sit here, it's, do the Knicks want cap space in 2023, 2024, 2025? Do they never want cap space ever again as long as we all live? And hopefully that's a very long time. Questions that we will try to sort out and figure out. But that's really, this question is how we kind of get to a lot of the other questions and fill in everything else from there. So let's talk about the previous trades.
Yeah.
Knicks traded in 2021. I guess 2020, not 2020. No, that's right. Exactly. 2021. Yeah.
When did that trade went down in early February, but it was the equivalent of like a January
2021 season. Yes.
Yeah, because the NBA got started late in the 2021 season.
Yep. So Dennis Smith Jr. and the Knicks second round pick. I think it was the Knicks second round pick, and it was actually the Hornets second round pick, but regardless, for Derrick Rose, and they basically traded someone who was completely out of the rotation and a draft pick for a rotation piece. This most recent trade, Kevin Knox and a protected, well, I guess it should be, now it's an Atlanta pick, which then San Antonio, but protected first round pick from Charlotte as well. And then Cam Reddish, Solomon Hill, and the Nets pick in 2025. So they trade someone who's out of the rotation and a draft pick for a rotation piece, a player they waived, and another draft pick.
I forgot they got that pick.
Yeah. And again, the Knicks did the same thing with the Timberwolves, where they are basically trying to prey on teams where they feel like, when are they going to be bad? Yeah. And when can we get their second round pick?
Yeah.
So something to consider as we move forward. Yeah. So I want to look at the Knicks cap sheet currently. Have you ever seen All the President's Men?
Yeah.
Great movie. Yeah. You remember one of the key lines in there?
I mean, there were a few, but which one do you think
of? Follow the money. That's the way you can always look at this. You just follow the money. So for example,
follow the money.
When you look at next year for the 2023-24 season, if the Knicks kept Cam Reddish, and obviously he wouldn't be making his cap hold, which is $17.9 million. And if they kept Derrick Rose, or they're not going to, I mean, they'd be a lot of money. They'd be an absurd amount of money to be spending. They'd be a tax team. No reason for them to be. But then if you remove Rose and you find a way to clear Cam Reddish's money, guess what? The Knicks are still under the salary, or still over the salary cap. So it would take a lot for them to get to that point where they really need money, but they could do it. You know, we're talking about Evan Fournier here. So maybe there's some sort of trade that they could do that gets them that point. But we should look at cap space for this summer as we plan ahead. These are the players that are 30 years old or younger, going to be unrestricted free agents in 2023.
Did you put the first name on this list as the first name on this list intentionally?
I did this by order of salary, but it's also hilarious. So the first player is Kristaps Porzingis. He's got a player option. At this point, John, would it surprise you if he didn't opt in and then extend?
Oh, I opt in and extend versus opt out. I won't that. I mean, if he'd have suitors if he opted out. And there's going to be teams with money to spend. I don't know. What do you think? You think he opts in and extends?
I kind of do. I mean, there are spots for sure we go. I think he'd be great in Utah for all the right reasons and just move on from there. But I think he eventually just takes the money and runs with it and then gets an extension because they're at the point where they can't really lose him. You know, if Bradley Beal wants to stay, and it seems like he does, then
for now
they need as much talent as they can. And they might lose Kyle Kuzma. They might be trading him. So
just everybody listening to this podcast should brace themselves for the fact that Kristaps Porzingis is going to get raised. It's going to happen.
I think he's going to make more than like $30 million. I
think he's going to make more than $30 million. Yes.
Damn. I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
I'll bet you a frosty beverage.
I will take a frosty beverage that his next salary does not start with a 3.
Average annual salary above 30. That's the bet.
Average out. I'll take that bet. Sure.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect.
Write it down, Andrew.
Next, we have D'Angelo Russell. Don't really see much of a need for D'Angelo Russell on the Knicks. Don't want him here particularly either.
Does D'Angelo Russell get to mid-level? I don't think he does.
I feel like there might be one team One team that's just like, hey, we've got the mid-level, but I do agree. And then like, I don't know what he offers. He's been playing better this week. That's the thing. This past week he's been good, but before that it's just been rough. All
right. Next up,
Red Van Vliet. He's got a player option. He's had a really down year, like very down. Yeah, it's been bad. Not a fit here anyway, especially with Jalen Brunson. Jeremy Grant. Grant's really fascinating to me because I don't see him as an option. Yes, I'll preface. I don't see him
He's not
leaving anywhere, but he could have extended by this point, I believe, and he just hasn't. So I think he's going to test the market in the sense of I can try to make more than what the max the Blazers can give me, but I don't see him going anywhere as well.
You know what? That's not nuts.
What?
That's because he
doesn't extend and then tries to get a raise off of the max extension you get now?
Because the most he could get right now is 20. Was he start at 25, 26 or something like that?
I think it's a little lower. I think he could get like 4 years, 112 or something along those lines.
It's fucking crazy to say that someone might pay him more than that in the open market. I don't think he's going anywhere, but yeah.
Right, agreed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a sunk cost for them too with Dame and everything.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. Miles Turner, unless the Knicks decide to change up a lot of what they do at the center position, don't see him as an option here.
He could extend. As Zach Lowe's been dropping those hints for a few weeks.
Yeah, he could do the rare extend and trade, which hasn't happened since Melo coming to New York. Then there's Karis LeVert. Obviously, the Knicks were in on Karis LeVert last year. They allegedly offered Evan Fournier and the Mavs first. I'm very glad that trade did not work out, but still a trade that I thought actually might be a leverage play in itself, because you remember the other suitor that was for Karis LeVert before he went to the Cavs?
I actually don't. Who was it?
It was the Mavs.
Oh, that makes sense.
So I think the Knicks are trying to squeeze the Mavs to get Brunson. And it's just it's my theory. It's not proven. It's just my theory.
Okay.
Gary Trent Jr., he's got a player option. He's definitely going to take that. He can make a lot more money. Could be a fit. I just don't see him. I don't see the Knicks taking Gary Trent Jr. to play him over Quentin Grimes. And I don't see Gary Trent Jr. coming off the bench in the next role, although he might, because he's coming off the bench sometimes in Toronto.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
I was about to say, like, he's making a lot of money for a bench guy. He's not playing bench minutes, even though he's coming off the bench. He's averaging, I want to say, somewhere close to 30 minutes a game. Mm-hmm. He gets his shots up, but like, of all the names on this list, he is the one guy that I could at least. I know where we're going with this, and I don't think any of these guys are options, but of these names, with maybe one exception, he's a guy that I could at least see them having a meeting about. But for the reasons you already stated, I would define that as unlikely.
Right. Okay. Malik Beasley, he's got a team option. I would imagine the Jazz picked that up. It's like $13-14 million. Easy for them.
Probably.
Christian Wood. I mean, could he go somewhere? Yeah, potentially. I think he's going to cost the Mavs a lot of money. He could extend in season, but I don't know, something about him testing the market. Why not?
I'm not sure I see Christian Wood as the missing piece for the New York Knickerbockers.
Oh, I definitely don't. And he's not going to be an option here, but
yeah.
You got Kyle Kuzma.
So that was the other
intriguing option.
The other name that I was saying, it's a guy they at least maybe have a meeting about.
Right. And when I say intriguing, I mean in the sense of I don't see it happening, because he is a legitimate 4 and the Knicks have Julius Randle. And unless the Knicks are moving Julius Randle, then Kyle Kuzma is not going to back up Julius Randle. The Knicks are going to get rid of Obi Toppin to then sign Kuzma to a large contract. What I think is going to happen is the Wizards will deal Kuzma to another team, like the Suns, for example, or something, and he'll just re-sign with them for a lot of money, a lot more money than the Knicks should be considering signing him for anyway.
The only reason I say he's an interesting name that, maybe they have a meeting about is we have seen in the past summers where teams make where there's lots of machinations going on, where there's a player moving out and then like somebody coming in to replace that player because of something else that's happening in a different spot on the roster. Like I could see him being a guy that they're interested in if they just like rejigger things like wholesale. But as you imply, there would be a lot of moving parts involved with that.
Yeah. Then you've got Josh Hart. He's got it's a player option, but it's also non-guaranteed. It's a weird contract.
Yeah, I think that's a value because they're picking that up.
Yeah. Well, but he may not.
Sorry,
he's not going. Yeah.
He will exercise that player option. Probably. Right. Yes. Right. Okay.
So he'll be expensive. I think he still stays because again, the Blazers, you don't think he will?
No, yeah, probably. That's fine.
Yeah. But even still as an option for the Knicks, I don't think he's integral. I think you can still get good enough production from Quentin Grimes where you don't necessarily need to bring Josh Harden unless it's him coming off the bench and he's got a starting role right now. So
I agree.
Doesn't seem to be right. Kelly Oubre Jr., he's had a better season, but he's still woefully inefficient. And I think he's in a lot of ways empty stats guy. It's just my take on it. What say you?
Yeah, I'm not an Oubre guy. Never been.
Dylan Brooks, we've talked about him before, could easily clear 18 million, right? Could potentially even get 20. I think it'd be steep, but I think the Grizzlies can afford it. So I feel like they might. Maybe they stick around at 15 million. I don't know, but I just don't think that the Knicks are going to target him. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. And then lastly, I had Jakob Poeltl. Same thing. Like, yes, he fits the Knicks in a lot of different ways. If he were a mid-level exception candidate, I'd say, what if the Knicks tried to go after him? But I just don't see that happening.
Don't see it happening either. Okay. Yeah. So we've managed to shuffle through 14 names that we, for various reasons, do not think are going to be in the Knicks plans.
Right. And I should add, the reason I didn't say restricted free agents is because it's just almost impossible to get actually good restricted free agents, which is really tough.
Yep.
So let's talk about cap space 2024, right? These are the other names. These are 30 years older or younger as well. Got Pascal Siakam. He's up for a new contract at that point. Kristaps Porzingis, if he decides to opt in and doesn't extend. Jaylen Brown. I guess I'll stop there for a moment. Siakam, Brown. I think the Raptors are an enigma, and I'll get to them later, but Brown, I don't really see anywhere, but he himself is an enigma too. So he could potentially leave. And I would be like, yeah, that's just Jaylen Brown. Sounds about right. Ultimately, I think he stays, but still.
It's a fascinating question because he's the one guy on this list, with all due respect to Siakam, who I think could probably talk himself into, and who the hell knows what the hell Jaylen Brown wants. I don't really care to know what Jaylen Brown wants. But would it shock you if we've learned that like Jaylen Brown feels strongly that he could be the no doubt about it best player on a team and wants to test that reality? Like, that wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, agreed. Got Alonzo Ball. He's got a player option. I think he will be taking that player option.
Talk about contracts that have not aged well.
Yep. Domantas Sabonis. He'll be a free agent. I would imagine he would just re-sign in Sacramento. They've got a good thing going over there. OG Anunoby, I've certainly talked about him before. I think he'd be certainly a good fit for almost any team. Really, he just brings great skill set. DeJounte Murray, he will be an unrestricted free agent. John, how hilarious? I think that's the word I'm going to go with. How hilarious would it be if DeJounte Murray left the Hawks? Not even for the Knicks. Let's take the Knicks out of the equation. But with everything brewing in Atlanta right now, if he left the Hawks.
Well, the funniest part would be is if the Hawks like crisis continued and they like traded Trae Young this summer and then DeJounte Murray left in free agency. That would be the funniest thing. That's a level of chaos that I'm here for it. I was about to say, I'm here all the way.
And then Luke Kennard, he's the team option. I'm sure the Clippers will pick it up. Steve Ballmer has more money than God. So
can I just say something about for the players on this list? Jaylen Brown, Domantas Sabonis, OG Anunoby, and DeJounte Murray. We've talked about it in the past, but for anybody wondering who has been noticing that nobody hits free agency in the NBA anymore because guys just extend off of their current contracts when they have the chance. These are 4 players who will not be extending off their current contract because the current rules only allow you to extend for up to or for a 20% raise. And even with a 20% raise off of their current deals, Murray, Anunoby, Sabonis, and Brown would still be woefully underpaid. So all 4, that's what makes 2024 a very interesting summer. All 4 of these guys are going to hit unrestricted free agency. None of them may leave, but they're going to hit unrestricted free agency.
Exactly. So I'm gonna stop the share for a moment and switch over to a spreadsheet that I've got going on.
Boy, this is all kinds of fun today.
Listen, I love this. This is the best.
This is your wheelhouse, man.
Yeah, exactly. I live for this time of year. It's the most wonderful time of the year. So we talked before about the Knicks and their whole payroll situation for this year and next year. That's all set. And on the side of the screen, I've basically got it written out for position wise, where, you've got Brunson, Grimes, Barrett, Randall, Robinson, and then under that, McBride, IQ. I've got an open, it's a vacant spot under Barrett, John. No one's sitting in it. There's no one there. And then you got Obi Toppin, Hartenstein.
Can we put Svi up ahead of Cam Reddish, because I think it's more likely that Svi gets in the game?
Yeah, we could do that. It was more, there's an effect for why I have him below Cam, but for the sake of it, for right now, posterity, we'll put him above
there we go.
There it is. So I want to talk about, again, the 2023 cap space idea. So imagine, this isn't going to happen, but imagine if the Knicks did want to go through the cap space route of this summer, and they traded Cam Reddish, Evan Fournier, and I want to say Derrick Rose, I think I said, for D'Angelo Russell. And then
Rose isn't there.
Where?
Rose isn't listed in your.
Oh, he isn't.
Oh my God!
No. You know what it was? I know why I did it. I think it was actually that's a lie, because there are other players there. So now I've added Rose. My apologies, Derek.
The man won an MVP, and he didn't even get on Jeremy's spreadsheet. My God, what does he have to do? What does the man have to do?
If he can't get into the rotation, he can't get into my spreadsheet. But I guess Cam Reddish and Evan Fournier can. So
terrible.
I'm human. It happens. So let's say the Knicks do try to get cap space in this scenario. They tried to trade for D'Angelo Russell just as expiring money. They move Evan Fournier. They move Cam Reddish. And I think that's and they moved, in this case, Ryan Arcidiacono for the money to work.
Okay.
So the Knicks are looking in this particular scenario where if they moved off of D'Angelo Russell, about $17 million in cap space. This is also factoring in, let's say they got the 15th and the 20th picks in the draft. So those salaries are included too. So this is why in addition to the free agents not being great, if your argument was like, oh, well, I love this free agent and I want the Knicks to sign him, this is pretty much where they get to if they wanted to move off of the salaries that we're talking about. We're not going to talk about, Randall, Barrett, Robinson, a lot of those guys. We'll save that for another time. And maybe they could be moved and they create more cap space, but it's just like, it's not enough where it really moves me to move them to sign someone of any of the players that we've listed that would meet that price point. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have them getting $17 million in space by moving on from, as you said, Fournier, Cam Reddish, and I think you said Ryan Arcidiacono, whose salary is non-guaranteed. And they, do away with Rose's cap hold. Okay. 17 million is about 6 million more than what the mid-level exception is projected to be. That could make a difference in terms of being able to sign someone versus not being able to sign someone. What I wonder, though, realistically, and look, these things change all the time, but given where the Knicks are and given the players who seem to be carving out roles for themselves, and given what it would take to responsibly displace those young players from the roles that they currently have, I wonder if someone that is in that price range would be the sort of guy that would make sense for them to sign. I don't know. I don't know about that. So that would seem to be unlikely.
Yeah. And I don't know if the talent you can get for, say, $17 million is that much different than the talent you get for the 11 or so $11 million you get if you just stayed above the cap and had the mid-level exception.
Yeah, I know exactly. That's my point. Is like if you're going to get that sort of player, like it's not appreciably different for you to do all these kinds of gymnastics. Right.
So let's look at Cam in terms of the salary portion of it. Right. So this is the same sheet they were looking at as if the Knicks were to, let's say they want to create cap space, and great, here we go. So if you look at it, let's say they do, it's never going to happen, but D'Angelo Russell for Evan Fournier, Cam Reddish, and then you've got Arcidiacono's salary going out, and then make the rosters work. The Wolves just, they've got a couple of non-guaranteed guys. They just wipe them away. So if you do this, the Knicks are essentially operating.
Money, to be clear, the Knicks don't want D'Angelo Russell. They're just trying to clear Evan Fournier's money off the books, get rid of Cam's cap hold, the whole thing. Okay.
Exactly. So it would basically just be resulting in $9.9 million in cap space, which is less than the mid-level.
Yes.
Whereas, so the Knicks would try to operate above it, even though they have less, which they could do if they don't waive D'Angelo Russell's cap hold, right? Like if you go about that, they don't have cap space anymore. Just if you keep his cap hold on the books, but they won't do that. They would renounce it.
Yeah.
It's not. So there's no point. There's no point to 2023 cap space. Yeah.
There's no point to the cap space there. And there's no point specifically if you're going to get cap space and it's less than what you could get for the mid-level, which every team that's over the cap gets that. So there's no point to having cap space that's less than the mid-level exception, essentially. Okay.
Exactly. And you could look at it from a larger picture of like if the Knicks extended Cam, which I know they're not going to do, but then it maybe bleeds into 2024 and that whole thing. But let's transition to quickly instead, because this is where it gets more fascinating to me, right? So if you're looking at this, so you're focusing on really 2024, 25, what I've got is Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Evan Fournier's money is off the books. Mitchell Robinson's still here. Derrick Rose's money is gone. RJ Barrett is here. I've removed Isaiah Hartenstein's cap hold. You could keep it there if you want, but I've removed it just right. Might as well.
Don't think we need it.
Yeah.
And the other salaries that are for sure here are Quentin Grimes and Jericho Sims. And then it looks like you're keeping Deuce McBride, who is on a non-guaranteed deal, but the way things are going, it would seem like he's trending towards getting that picked up.
Yeah, well, exactly. He'd be a restricted free agent come 2024.
Oh, wait, sorry. He's on a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
That's my bad. Yeah, that's his cap hold. Okay.
And then let's say the Knicks again have the 15th and 20th picks. Although again, I don't expect them to have both. Maybe one of them, maybe they trade up, whatever. We'll get into that later at a different date. And then, 2024, maybe they have the 20th pick that they're picking. There's also some of the protected picks. Maybe the Wizards pick finally conveys. It'll be top 12 protected instead of top 14. So if you then keep Quickly's cap hold and Obi's cap hold, the Knicks are above the salary cap by like a little over $2 million. And this is then where the whole thing with Quickly comes into play. And it's so frustrating because, again, follow the money. That's the really frustrating part here. If you remove Quickly's cap hold, which is small, by the way, it's only $12.5 million. You remove that, then you're operating with, okay, it's $10 million. It's really not a whole lot. But then you start wondering, like, what other things might the Knicks do, right? Like, gets to Obi Toppin. Obi's he's not going to get paid what his cap hold is, which is $20.4 million. But if you're the Knicks, are you moving Obi? Is it less money? Like how is it operating? Like if you cut that in half, you do $10 million. Let's just say it's his salary. Knicks suddenly have $20.7 million. Let's say they kick the can down the road and, I got to do roster charges in a second, but let's say they don't trade or they trade out of the 20th pick here, right? In 2023. Okay. Suddenly they've got 4, 5. We've re-signed Obi, 5 guys, 6, 7. McBride's on the book. That's 8, 9. So
you're dealing with some cap holds.
2 roster charges. Right. So like you're $21.7 million. And again, if you remove Obi completely, and sorry to do this, but if you just wipe him away and you trade him for something that's a future value, you're at $30.5 million in cap space. It's not enough for a max for a 0 to 6 year player. But I guess the philosophy for the Knicks is, are you basically trying to consolidate the younger players you have for future picks to then sign one player that can fill up a lot of that money? Maybe you go further and you can even potentially sign, a Siakam type if you really want it. Maybe it's Jaylen Brown. Like maybe you can move these guys. You can sign someone and then go over the cap to trade for a star, whatever it is. That's where I think they're headed. I feel as though they're headed towards that 2024. Summer. As of this moment, that's where I think their angle is going to be. Of course, we can talk about the cap spike in 2025. I think that's important too. But it seems like if there were a time, like if there's a reason why you're getting Cam Reddish out, okay, you don't want to pay him, that's fine. But Is it because you don't want to pay him because there's a role here, or you just don't want to pay him? And then with Quickly, he has a role here. Do you just not want to pay him? If you don't want to pay him, why not? Because as we've talked about before, you can trade a good player on whatever contract he will have. Emmanuel Quickly is a good player. The contract he has, I don't think it will be egregious. Well, he's on the bench. That's just how he is seen as a bench player. Whether he starts in Jalen Brunson's absence or not, we will soon find out. But I just don't think that he will cost a lot. And I think that the reason why you would move him is because you want to prioritize cap space. And if you're going to prioritize cap space, it feels like, okay, well, there are no half measures here. So what happens to Obi? Are there other players who are moved?
Well, hold capacity? on. Let me cut you off at the pass here. For one, Jalen Brunson isn't missing any games just yet. They haven't announced it. I refuse.
Fair enough.
I refuse to believe he's going to miss any time until he actually misses time. Second of all, I think an alternative reason why you move Quickly now, and I'll just lean on what Fred said on this podcast at the end of last week, is that, the way Fred put it was like, they're not going to move him for nothing. This would be, I think, a way for them to kill two birds with one stone, in that there's a financial aspect to it, which obviously you just went over, but there's also adding another pick to their treasure chest. And I think it would have to be a pick that they would feel could potentially make a material difference in trade negotiations down the line. So I think that's also a part of it. We're not going to need to wonder about the answer to this question for much longer, because if they take back money in any trade that extends into 2024, 25, we'll know that's not a priority. That being said, looking up and down the league at contracts that you could see teams potentially wanting to get rid of, very, very, very few. And honestly, there's only one that even comes to mind, and it's the Duncan Robinson contract.
We'll get there. Don't worry. I got you.
Extend into 2024, 25. So, barring anything unforeseen, I think they will probably be able to maneuver pretty easily into cap space in 2024, 25. I just think the only thing last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back to you, is I think by that point, right? Julius Randle is going to have 1 or 2 more years left on his deal. I think he's going to have 2
in 2024, 25.
1, 2, 3.
Entering that season, he will have 1 year of team control. And then I believe he'll opt out after that when there's the cap spike.
Okay.
That's me.
So not a lot of time left on his deal. Before you know what, RJ Barrett's going to be, only a couple of years left on his deal. Jalen Brunson is going to be essentially an expiring contract list. But there are ways for them to pretty easily maneuver into max cap space by trading one of those larger salaries that I think will be easier to trade by that point. So I don't necessarily think they need to. Not that they don't need to worry about it now. Of course, you have to worry about this stuff now. It's your job. It's you're the front office. But there's going to be other ways for them to open up space over the next year and a half. I guess that's the only point that I do want to make.
Absolutely. And listen, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, Jeremy, what the fuck did you just do? You're trading Emmanuel Quickly. You're trading Obi Toppin. You're trading everyone I love. I hear you. I love them too. I don't necessarily want them to move. And I'm not suggesting that the Knicks would be like, yeah, we'll get a couple second round picks and we'll call it a day. It would be worthwhile trades. And they're not going to attach Emmanuel Quickly to get rid of Evan Fournier, for example. They're going to, I was talking about this with Prez and Schwinn today, and Prez made a good point where it's upgrade or assets. Either get the upgrade or you get the assets. And that's how this front office lives and breathes. And it's unfortunately going to kind of feel like a churn and burn situation where there will be some players that we have grown very fond of, but that means that their values are higher, most likely. And that means that they're viewed as good players to other teams too. And other teams will then have something of value to give. And if they don't, then the Knicks will not take those offers. Yep. So this Cam is really the first time that you could argue they're really trading any of their young players that they've incorporated into the fold. Right? I mean, they didn't. No, I think that's Dennis Smith Jr., Kevin Knox.
Yeah, no, that's very fair.
So I'll go back to the presentation, because we are going to talk about these contracts that you have.
Some potential targets.
Exactly. So if we go one further, undesirable contracts and the projected year of free agency that we've got here. So first one on the board, I did this kind of it was like an LOL, but also somewhat serious, is Chris Paul, where listen, Chris Paul is not Father Time is undefeated for a reason. He's had some good games, but he has not been great overall. And the way his contract works is it's partially guaranteed for next season. I think it's like $14.5 million. And then the year after that is non-guaranteed completely.
Yep.
So if you're a team like the Suns and at a certain point you say, yeah, Chris Paul this, Chris Paul that, how can we make an upgrade? He's an option. The only thing is, okay, well, where's he going to play? He's not going to play with Jalen Brunson. He's not going to play behind Jalen Brunson. It just doesn't seem like a great fit, but he is what I would consider it an undesirable contract. Is that fair?
I think it is fair at this point to call Chris Paul an undesirable contract. Sure.
I think it was fair to call it at the moment the ink dried, but so be it.
Probably.
All right. That's really it for 2023, which is convenient because as we just established, the Knicks may not really want cap space that year. So you got Tobias Harris in 2024. Got to tell you, John, don't see it with Tobias Harris. Not as long as Julius Randle's on this team. He's not going to come off the bench. It just doesn't make any sense to me. He's not going to play the three. He could, but I just don't see that happening.
I feel bad for Tobias Harris. He clearly wants a situation where he could be, a team where he's on a team where he has more to do, but that's not the Knicks problem.
Maybe Phoenix. Phoenix. That could be an option. I don't know. Salary's going to be tricky though to match.
Yeah, I was about to say
probably not. But yeah, they'll find at some point he'll be moved, I believe.
Yeah.
Doug McDermott.
It's on the Spurs. We should know.
They're not going to care. They're fine with it probably. Also, he's not that undesirable of a contract in my mind. Of the ones that I've got listed here, he's probably the most palatable.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad deal.
Yeah. Gordon Hayward, we've certainly talked about him in the past, and there's a weird situation. Have you been following with his shoulder and management and his wife?
No, I just know that he's out for a while.
So he is out for a while. It seems it was misdiagnosed, and his wife, Robin, posted on Instagram about how he was allegedly misdiagnosed, and they're really upset at the team doctors. And
really,
she talked with the mother of another player, and they've also been really disappointed and upset with how things have gone. So all is not well in Charlotte with Hayward. And when Fred said on the podcast, feel like Hayward's not going to end his this contract in Charlotte. It's like, it was like, yeah, it's what I've been saying for since the summer, where it doesn't feel like he's going to finish it up there. Question is what the urgency for them to move him is, but we might talk about that. Davis Bertans is another option, but he's got a $5 million partial guarantee in 2024-25 season. That I don't know about you, but it doesn't seem like the Knicks style to me to have partial money that the Knicks would basically have to incur a dead cap hit.
And I'm not holding my breath for a trade with the Mavs anytime soon. Just throwing that out there.
True. Exactly. Another one, Devontae Graham. It's really not a bad contract. I mostly have him here in the event that the Pelicans. The reason it's because the Pelicans are going to run into a tax situation. They have not had a tax situation beforehand. So that's where my head is at, where it's like, are they going to move it? But it's like, actually, if we're talking least undesirable contracts, it might be him over Doug McDermott. I
was going to say, Graham, it's not a lot of money. It's only $12.5 million per year. But the thing there is they're a little banged up right now. So he's been playing rotation minutes. Really, I think he's been playing rotation minutes the entire year. But that was also early in the year when Dyson Daniels hadn't moved into the rotation yet. Like, if everybody's healthy, Devontae Graham doesn't probably have a spot in their rotation. And his next year is fully guaranteed. And I think it's the year after that. There's a partially guaranteed year. There's a partial.
Yeah. It's like,
so like, I actually think that contract is something they could really look to move. I don't know at what price though.
Yeah. Next, Lonzo Ball. We talked about him. Imagine he'll take the player option. It's a bad contract.
You have John Collins here. Wow.
Well, it's just because it seems like the Hawks keep wanting to move him. But there's also another reason I have John Collins' contract here. I'll get into that shortly. But it's not going to be a fit for the Knicks. Just don't see that.
No.
I think he'll go somewhere else. And then your man, the myth, the legend himself, Duncan Robinson. He's got a player option in year 5. You know he's going to take that.
That contract's not aging well, is it?
I'm glad it's Miami that has to deal with it and not the Knicks. So
man,
gonna go back and look at our beautiful spreadsheet. Let's talk about the Heat. Let's go in reverse order, right?
Okay.
So the Heat, to me, like, we know there's interest in Cam Reddish. Okay, well, how do you make the math work for that?
And we should say, just there are they one of the reported teams that had expressed interest? It's them, Milwaukee, and LA, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So, I mean, if they wanted him, just purely a 1-for-1 type deal, it could be Oladipo, but that's tricky because Oladipo is a player option, and maybe the Knicks are okay with that. But if he opts in, that's great. If he doesn't opt in, then that's kind of not great for their plans. Because then he wants an extension, or he walks, and then you've essentially lost that salary. Caleb Martin's been having a really nice season. He's extended. He could be an option, but I just don't see the Heat moving him in any capacity, really. Tyler Hero, not going to happen. There's the poison pill deal anyway. And then it's Dwayne Dedman, where it's like, all right, are the Knicks really going to do Cam Reddish for Dwayne Dedman and 1 or 2 second-round picks? It doesn't seem like the wisest of options to me. So I would thought of that. If you're attaching Cam to someone like Fournier, what are we talking here? Like, is it Robinson and Dedmon and more second round? Like, it just doesn't. I feel like any deal that has Duncan Robinson center around it needs to include a first round pick, and I don't think Miami cares enough to do that. I would agree with that. And so, I don't think Cam is enough to swing their opinion on that. Exactly. Then we've got the Hawks. So again, I think John Collins is not going to come here. If anything, it'd have to be a 3-team deal, but I wanted to highlight them because they're fascinating to me in that the luxury tax, they seem to want to cut money. They're very close to that edge. Bogdanovich, I thought maybe he's an option where, like, is he going to opt out of his deal? Is he going to opt in? He was unhealthy for a while. Now he's playing really well. Are they going to look to cut money in some capacity? Because, they're not going to trade Trey, not trading Clint Capella, not trading Murray. They've just extended Hunter. It'd be silly to move a Kongwu. Like, yeah, is it dumping Justin Holiday and they call it a day? Sure, but they also might have issues next year. So I don't think there's a deal here, and I'll turn it to you. But it's just like the tax in Atlanta is something to keep in mind. Very curious how they navigate it. Knicks aside, just as a basketball fan. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the trade would be. The Knicks do not seem like a contender to land a guy like Bogdan Bogdanovich, and like, what, even if they were interested, like, what's the trade there? Mm-hmm. I don't see it. Yeah. So 2 down. Let's talk about the Bulls. Man, I'm so happy that we don't have to root for the Bulls, because that team would just depress me every waking day of my life. Really would. But the Bulls are in a fascinating spot right now. And I think the Lonzo situation is very interesting. I just want to say that because, like, this is a guy who was playing really, 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 really well last year, and was like clearly was an integral part to what they were doing. They were in first place when the guy was injured, when the guy went down with the injury. Mm-hmm. It's been all downhill since then. And, like, we just don't know if he's going to get back on the court. But, like, when he's on there, he's still good. Like, I also feel bad for them. Yeah, but listen, they've got one pick that they can really trade right now, and it's the Portland pick in this year's draft if it falls from 15 to 30. Yeah. So, like, it's going to cost a first round pick to move Lonzo Ball. And I think they'd rather wait and upgrade than not. But I still think they'll tear it down at a certain point if they keep, not this year, but maybe next year, especially when they have their pick. I think they are right now. Wouldn't you argue the most they're the team that bears watching the most from the perspective of, like, what happens if they
if they decide to push the button, and blow it up. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. And then want to talk about the Hornets. So
why do we always talk about? We always end up talking about the fucking Hornets.
We do, and it usually centers around some of their middling players that they have for whatever reason.
They have a lot of those.
Well, so here's the thing: you mentioned on that same Hornets podcast about Rozier, and
yes, I can't quit him.
I just don't see him as an option.
Why?
And I know, well, just based on the fact that it's like the whole point of what the Knicks are trying to do right now is they're trying to take 3 guys who are not in the rotation and probably turn them into players who aren't really in the rotation either, or like not playing a significant role. Like quickly, there are teams that are out that should be very interested in quickly because he's a good player.
Yeah. But
it's sort of thing where with Rozier, I just don't know where he fits for the Knicks because he signed for a while. I think it messes with their plans a little bit. If we've established that 2024 is the time, then so be it. But other than that, it's kind of like, okay, doesn't really make sense to me. I think they're going to look at other options. But I'm fascinated by them because, again, it comes back to Gordon Hayward, where you basically look at this and it's like, well, are they going to pay Kelly Oubre? Maybe they'll retain him. Maybe they'll flip him. PJ Washington, he's got to be extended. They'll probably, he turned down, I think, 4 years and $55 million. Jalen McDaniels is going to make some money. They're going to have a really high draft pick. That's going to cost at least, if they pick 5th, it's going to cost almost $8 million. They've got another
a lot of
pick.
Decisions to make.
They do.
And that's part of why I think Rozier is at least an interesting name to watch. Not particularly for the Knicks, but just around the league, because he's in the first year of a 4-year, 92 or 93, whatever it is, $1 million extension. And you could easily see them wanting to get off that money. That's all.
100%. I just don't think it's going to be Knicks related. That's all I'm saying. I think you're right in terms of them moving Rozier, but so here's the fascinating part where it's like they're already over the cap with cap holds and everything, and that's only going to grow more intensely because you pay Jalen McDaniels, for example. Let's say you give him even $10 million a year. All right, now you're further into it, and then. Are there other guys you're paying? How much are you paying Kelly Oubre? Are you giving him $20 million? You're just adding more and more onto it.
Yeah.
The fascinating part is, and you might be saying well, it's not that big of a deal. The Hornets for the last 3 years or so have been 6th or 7th in money spent. They like not paying guys. And they've got LaMelo having a contract coming up pretty soon in the 2024-25 season. So they're just a fascinating option as well with everything going on.
I would not be shocked if they moved Rozier. That's all. That's my only point. And I don't know. No.
I wasn't disagreeing with the fact of moving Rozier. It was more the idea of involving the Knicks. That was all.
Yeah. And the only reason I think the Knicks are a team that I would keep an eye on there is because if they get an interesting young player in Cam Reddish, who if you're Charlotte and you're at the stage of the season where already you're 1/3 of the way through and it's okay, time to start throwing shit against the wall and improve our lottery odds. Talk about a guy who could check both boxes. And if you're then given, it's for the Knicks, it's well, we're giving up 2 players we don't want and we're just taking on the money. So then it comes down to the conversation we were having before is it's how much do they value the cap space in 2024 and 2025, because Rozier extends through both of those years. And that's why I kind of said what I said before, which is we're going to find out very soon, probably certainly within the next 2 months, how much they value that cap space.
100%.